Hello, and welcome to Emerging Grower, a podcast where we will focus on bringing growers and AgTech professionals together to help accelerate conversations between the two fields in the agriculture industry. This podcast is energized by Grand Farm, which is enabling technology to feed the world by facilitating collaboration and innovations solving the world's largest challenges in agriculture technology. My name is Cameron McNabb, and I am a member of the Grand Farm team who is helping facilitate this podcast. Joining us in this month's episode, we have Adam Spelhaug and Asim Benes discussing data management platforms in AgTech. Adam is a regional account manager at GDM Seeds, which provides cutting-edge technology to research, develop, and commercialize maximum yield soybean varieties, as well as other extensive crops. Adam also has had 15 years of experience being an agronomist at Peterson Farm Seeds. Austin is a senior key account executive at RealmFive, which is accelerating the agriculture industry's transition to efficient digital supply and labor via automation. We hope you enjoy Adam and Austin's conversation about data management platforms and AgTech, and hope you gain a greater insight in the world of agriculture.
Yeah, if you want to give me a little background on yourself and kind of where you're from and what your perspective is, that'd be great.
Sure. So I grew up on a farm, small farm, big corn, soybeans, wheat, sunflower, alfalfa, cattle, southwest of Fargo, about 30 miles. So Kindred is the town that still living today and farming in. We're kind of on the edge of the Red River Valley with some ground in the valley, but mostly it's kind of lighter, sandier soils, kind of more in that cattle area outside the valley. And always enjoyed helping dad and farming and doing all that, and kind of thought that for sure I want to be either a farmer or do something in agriculture. Not having the biggest farm. Sometimes you look at some of those economics things, right? And I graduated from high school in the mid 90s, and we had one really good year there, but a lot of times corn was about $1.80 and LDPs and all that fun stuff. So I figured I probably need to get a real job, but maybe stay involved in ag. So went to NDSU, like a lot of guys my age and coming out of farms in North Dakota. Went to NDSU and got an ag economics degree there. Went into retail. Was in retail for about 4 or 5 years. Just outside of Fargo, and then when we got married, it was out by Bismarck. Wife had a good government job out there, so worked out in that area for a while, which that was a great experience because I got to see a whole different kind of farming. More drier land, a lot more no-till out there, different crops. Still just good producers got to work with. And then my passion, my dad was a Northrop King seed dealer growing up. So was always around the kind of the seed side. Always liked the seed side. Kind of figured I'd like to get in the seed industry, and then started working for a Pulse USA, which is more field peas, lentils, inoculants, that kind of company out of Bismarck. And then we ended up after we were married for a couple of years, ended up found out we were pregnant with twins, and my wife's from Minnesota, and thought it'd be probably good to get closer to family and free babysitters, things like that. So we moved back to my home area, and I started working for a seed company on the eastern, just outside of Fargo. And I was with them for 15 years, and as product management, agronomist, that kind of thing. And I started slowly farming on the side since I was living close to home or close to the farm. Started kind of transitioning that farm from dad to myself. So I was working full-time job and farming on the side, and then as of 2 years ago, took a different role, and now I'm working in the seed genetics industry. So working with soybean genetics and licensing, and so I'm working with all the seed companies really, and I cover from Nebraska, Iowa, and north. And then at that time, Dad was starting to slow down, retire, and want to get out of it. So then I ended up taking over the farm. But we had transitioned some land. We had some, a neighbor started farming some land again after the prices were good in 2013, 2014. That his grandpa we had rented land from them. He started farming again, and still work with them pretty good as good neighbors, and might be in my future to farm that land at some point again when they retire. So So we're not farming a lot of acres, about 700 to 800 acres, doing that on the side, but it's enough having a full-time job. And the nice thing is I don't need family living out of the farm, so my break evens are a little bit higher, or a little bit lower, I should say. So I don't need, when 5, 6, 7 years ago when prices were the way they were, they, still making somewhat of a profit off the farm, which is good. So, and then you get years like the last couple of years doing really well and having some good crops. Um, but I've always, working with a lot of customers and growers and guys in North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota over the last 20 years being in seed, um, in agronomy, pick up a lot of things and different things you want to try and do on your farm. So doing more no-till now, which also helps with having a real job. I don't have to sit in a tractor doing tillage for 15 hours a day. So that's pretty good. And tried to do, even at the scale of our farm, trying to do more with um, precision planning and implemented GPS. Like most farms, we were probably a little later on that side with our scale. And Dad said, "Well, I can still drive a straight row. I don't need GPS." But trying to implement some of those efficiencies into the farm just to so I don't have to spend as much time out there as needed, I guess. Um, so that's kind of quick story. Still have 4 kids. Got a couple that are juniors in high school now. The oldest, the twins, and a boy and a girl, and then another son that's a junior, and then a daughter that's 8th grade. So chasing them around and sports and all those activities too keeps us busy.
Yeah, that's I don't have children, but your background's a heck of a lot more interesting than mine maybe. But not having children, I look at my friends who farm and who are in the ag industry and they're doing things, and it's I mean, if you're in support roles like your full time job is, like my job is, it's a 13-month a year kind of a thing. Right? There's a
Right.
lot of overlap in there, and you just kind of keep going, and so yeah, seeing the challenges that what a challenge it is to have family and kind of bring them forward. And how do we put more hours into a day,
Yep, for sure.
is always a big question. And sometimes it comes with reducing tasks, and sometimes it comes from multitasking, and oftentimes it comes from kind of offloading that into some other spaces. But yeah, I mean, not unlike you, I grew up in a diversified cropping scenario as well, down here in southeast Nebraska. My family still farms about half an hour north of Lincoln, a little town called Valparaiso.
Sure.
We kind of grew up actually in sort of a transitional space. We had access to both irrigated acres and dryland acres growing up, corn and soybean and forage production, and then a cow calf operation. As sort of costs and dynamics around things changed, we actually chose my family operation chose to go away from irrigation and actually towards a dryland management scenario in our cropping system, which was, I wouldn't say it was unique for our area. It's probably unique for the state of Nebraska at large. People try to get more irrigation
Right.
as opposed to less, but just the increase in costs and where we were in relation to the aquifer, some dynamics had changed there and created some unique efficiency needs. Yeah, I attended the University of Nebraska Lincoln. My background is actually in animal science and in ag education,
Okay.
formally. But when I got out of school there, when I left school there, my first job was in the agronomic space. It was the mid 2000s, 2005 or so, and there was not a lot of money to be made on the livestock side of things, but there was some money to be made and some opportunity in the cropping systems. And so um, I had taken a position in ag retail with a large co-op in kind of central and southeast Nebraska, at a location there, and kind of learned the ins and outs. I went and worked for a couple of seed companies over the years in support of both ag retail and then kind of some direct farmer sales as well. And kind of, I would say, honed my craft as a sales agronomist. Ultimately, I'd actually moved away from Nebraska and I lived in the southeast U.S. for a number of years. And I was a regional manager for a large liquid fertilizer company. And so I managed about 15 states. I had everything kind of south of the Mason-Dixon and from about central Texas, Dallas, Texas, effectively east to the Atlantic seaboard. And really formatively for me, that experience that I gained down there outside of the Great Plains, outside of the Midwest, working with different people, different cultures, different technologies, and different cropping systems. That lent itself to sort of some creative thinking and thinking outside of the box. While I was there, I transitioned to, while I was living in that part of the world, I should say, I transitioned to an ag technology company specific to an ERP system for enterprise resource management system. And they also had an agronomic platform that I worked very closely with. And that agronomic platform tied directly to, um, there was some on, some direct to farmer use of that, but it was primarily ag retail and distribution facing. And so, really kind of slingshotted me into the position that I'm in today, working with RealmFive here back here in Lincoln, creating and developing tools to fit into kind of, I guess, the platform environment, but with maybe some more specific focus. One of the things that I think about as I kind of reflect on, how did I get into ag technology, or how do we get into this space in general? Working in support of ag retail and ag service providers for darn near 20 years now, I guess, 15, 16, 17 years. I've always been around emerging technology, we would consider emerging technologies, right? I mean, going back to the early 2000s, working with SMS soil sampling, or some of the earlier grid sampling, elements, and bringing things into a cloud space, and things that were more advanced than just pulling stuff off of a yield monitor, actually doing something with the data. I guess I've always kind of been involved in that, but working full time in that space has been a transition for me. And so, looking at my production background as a family growing up, and then kind of where we've come now, it's shocking how fast we've gained in this space over a couple of decades, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a lot of advancement, like I said, especially in the last 5 years, about 5 to 10 years, and then I think lot more implementation, a lot more thinking about how we can use stuff, and maybe some of it's how we can. It seems like there's so many options out there for a farmer, and a lot of them don't overlap. It'd be nice to have just kind of I can log into one platform and I can pull this into here and this into there, and I did a lot of when drones are really starting to be the buzzword topic. Um, the first quadcopters are coming out. You had to strap a GoPro to and try to get that fisheye angled lens converted over to something you could utilize. All that kind of stuff 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was. And then, okay, now what I do, or now I got all this data, or got all this, you know, at that time it was sending it off and getting a file back 2 weeks later. And now some of it you can, as you're flying, you're getting the picture stitch and being able to look at stuff. And so it's pretty cool on that side.
So is that quite, what some of the stuff that we talked about at RealmFive is that proprietary nature of some of these platforms, right? And not everybody has proprietary information and processes, but from the standpoint of being able to talk across platforms, right? This sort of interconnectivity between platforms and resources. How do you assess technology from your end as a farmer? How do you look at that and say, hey, this is a platform that can be utilized with other platforms, and this is one that I want to invest not just money in, but every time you bring something new on from technology, you're investing time as a resource, and you're investing a number of other things beyond just the cash. What's your process for assessing that?
Yeah, and that's hard too. I mean, I think we all kind of know that there isn't just this holy grail of one platform that's going to handle everything. So you try to find the ones that do multiple things across multiple. If I can have three of them that I'm working with, but that covers all my needs. Trying to minimize some of that, and some of it maybe with me, I kind of understand the industry, understand the game, probably working in the industry a lot, and working for companies or working with companies, that kind of, you know, they've got to make money too, right? I mean, for the farmer, just yes, we want everything, we want it cheap, we want it quick, we want it easy, but I know I have that understanding of the business side of agriculture too, and those providers have to make money too, and can't be giving out all the trade secrets, right? So there's some of that give and take and some of that dynamic, and some of it has just happened by acquisitions, and things have gotten lumped in together,
Yeah,
making
and I
things
think
easy. But
yeah, and that is, you're exactly right from a technology provider's perspective. Um, there's the price of a thing. So whatever we're delivering, whatever that platform looks like today, or the data set looks like today, and then there's the price of, sort of continuing to maintain and future investment in that space, and making sure that it's that it's intuitive and that farmers like it and that people are continuing to find value in it. And so there is the cost of that production, the cost of that maintenance. And it's, from us and from our perspective, we generally look at that as kind of an investment in, future technologies and things like that.
Yeah. And the whole data thing, I've never been one that's so scared about companies having access to my data either. I know that's always been a conflict at some time with some farmers, really tightly held to it. And I just figure the companies that I'm working with, there's a reason I'm working with them. I probably trust them, and hopefully I'm going to get a better result from them by them using my data. Yeah, is there stuff in the back that your data gets sold, but we all have an iPhone in our pocket that's listening to everything, and all that stuff's going somewhere without us seeing a nickel out of it either. So, um, we kind of do with one hand and talk with the other one. So it's some of those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example. I talk with a lot of, the folks that are, say, primary producers, but then folks in the industry as well that are kind of on the support side and maybe counterparts of mine and other organizations. And there's always, the question about data ownership or who has what data or how is data flowing. There's a lot of questions about it. And I get the feeling a lot of times folks, they may ask the question because they're supposed to ask the question. But the reality is, you're right. I mean, if you trust the company that you're working with, then and you as a producer or whatever your position is as a customer, retain ownership of that data. That's about as far as you can, really, you know, distrust or trust whatever that process is. A good example, we've got a great client in the upper Midwest up in Michigan, as a livestock producer and row crop producer, pretty large scale on both. And I asked him for access. I said, hey, can I use you as an example and utilize some of what we're doing there, the use cases that we have deployed with you. Can I show those around? Can I talk about those via social media or just in customer facing conversations? And what do I need to do to protect your data? He said, don't worry about it. He said, there's really no single point of information that anybody can see of mine that's going to get me in trouble or compromise anything that I do because I take care of my back end processes.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it helps you guys do better, and expand your business, that gives you more resources and things to work with. It should, eventually roll back to him too, having more offerings and things like that, you would think. So I think,
Well,
I think a
it
fair amount
does.
of forward thinking farmers think that way. And then there's some that just don't. So
No, that's exactly right. And I think it's a matter of, sometimes we get moving so fast with the development of, this tech space, whether it's IoT or even sometimes mechanical technologies and, other things that evolve. We want to make sure that we're checking all the boxes. But, the
yeah,
reality is maybe we're sometimes worrying about things that we don't need to worry about today. And I think engaging in a good conversation with the technology provider, whatever that means to the producer, I always encourage that. If it's somebody that's pulling soil samples for you, great. If it's somebody who's providing, baseline genetics and genetic licensing for you, awesome. Ask questions and find out what you should be asking, and what is really pertinent. And I think that's sometimes there's so much information coming at farmers now
right.
from all ends, and making sure that we're sort of focusing on the things that are most important and most pertinent to our bottom line. Finding good partners in the industry to help you find that focus is valuable.
It's probably should be good to getting 15 minutes in here, but give us a good background in RealmFive and how it started and where you guys are working with in the space. It'd be good
Yeah,
for me to
yeah,
know too. I know a little bit, doing some prior history, and I think you guys had some work with Grand Farm up here a year or two ago, with some sensors. So I think I talked to even maybe one of you at the Cultivate or one of those events that we've had. But no, that'd be good to hear that
yeah.
background.
Yeah, you bet. We are deployed. We're a sponsor of Grand Farm and Emerging Prairie up there. In fact, we just earlier this fall, right after kind of I think it was right ahead of the announcement for the Castleton site, and the groundbreaking there. We actually deployed some new sensors on site there, and so we've got a weather station and some environmental sensors and things up there. And so we're really excited to see that, the development of the Grand Farm at the new location at Castleton, and what's going to kind of come of all of that, right? That's really fun for us. But background on our organization and our company. So we are an ag technology company, and we're our interest is in providing automation to processes related to supply chain and labor management. That's really what we're focusing on, top end or kind of top line. We were founded in 2015. And so we were founded by two gentlemen, both from private industry. Our CEO, Steve Tippery, got together with Brant Berkey, our chief product officer, and they both kind of had a lot of ideas about what an ag technology company could be and solutions that could be provided, and finding some synergies together. They're both engineers by trade, and so Steve has a history of working for. He was with companies like Klaus, Agco, Caterpillar before Klaus, and a few others in there that, as a product manager, kind of on the machinery side of things, and project manager. Brant Berkey had kind of a dual prong experience. So he was head of a company called Digitech, which ended up becoming Lindsay FieldNet, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so irrigation controls and management. His family also had a large swine genetics company, and they had sold that out a few years prior. And so Brant was sort of, I wouldn't say bored. He was definitely not bored, but looking to get back into the corporate world without having to go the corporate way. And Steve was kind of the same way. So they founded RealmFive here in Lincoln, Nebraska. At the time, part of Innovation Campus. I think we may have been the first full-time resident on Innovation Campus, now that I think about it, which is terrific. And really started out in the agronomy space with the focus, or with the objective of influencing sort of multiple verticals across agriculture. And where that's evolved to today is providing some good agronomic technologies. We've got some good large clients there. We do things in the soil moisture and environmental sensing and irrigation space across North America, and I believe 4 other countries outside of the US and Canada. And so we've become kind of a global brand in that regard. We've also moved way more into understanding the inventory and the management of commodity inventories and transportation of commodities. And so, we have some interesting solutions around whether that's grain or, sometimes, quite frankly, we treat manure effluent as a kind of a commodity in many regards. And so we can help manage some volumes there, crop input commodity or crop input volumes, liquid fertilizer. We do a lot of work with the ag retail space. We also do a lot of work that's producer facing as well, right? So, whether we're enabling platforms that are pushing technology kind of through these operations and enterprises to bring value, or just supplying some decision-making metrics. And then we're working with the ag processor and manufacturing space. Same areas, inventory and operational management, but just providing maybe a different context around some of that data and information to be able to make some informed decisions. And we like to, we kind of like to work in the places where there are problems to solve that maybe they're not gaining a lot of attention from other folks, right? So corn and soybeans, we do work there, but everybody's kind of focused on corn and soybeans.
Yeah.
One of our more interesting clients is a sugar beet production company up in the Pacific Northwest. And sugar beets as a commodity is a challenging one to manage, because it's a non-conforming commodity that has a lot of the same problems. And as everything else, if you come in from the Red River Valley, you see them moving around there all the time. It's a fast, furious.
Yeah, I've been around
season,
sugar
right?
beets. We never raised them, but lots of neighbors and friends and family that are. So yeah, surrounded by it and hear about it all the time. So you bet.
Yeah, and so providing solutions that are based in real time metrics, to be able to provide better decisions on when and how to manage that commodity. That's been a really fun project, and one that we're continuing to advance.
No, that's good. I think there's definitely opportunities to, like you said, everybody's focused on the big corn soybean acre, but there's probably a lot of solutions there already too, because everybody is focused. So, so finding some of these other things you can do, or how to, you know, I know on the irrigation side, I looked into trying to do some, because I've got really light sandy soils on some of our farm. We just don't have the water, unfortunately, underneath. But there was a couple fields that would have worked great, to put some irrigation on. We think of North Dakota, there's a lot more ditching and tiling and that kind of activity, trying to get rid of the water. But I think a lot of those go hand in hand too. I know, working with growers in Minnesota and some in Iowa, there's a lot of those irrigated fields are tiled too. So you can maximize that, get rid of that early water, all those kind of things. So
Absolutely. I think one of the areas that we get we see a lot of traction and energy for for us to participate in, is sort of in that environment. I almost hesitate to call it environmental compliance, but that's really what we're talking about. Kind of
Yep.
the
Oh yeah.
sustainability space, providing data that's relevant to whatever sort of environmental management we're partaking in. You know, we have some large processors and manufacturers who are very interested in, they need to understand not just their water usage, but sort of water movement across their footprint. What are they doing in that space, and how is it relating to, um, you know, just best management practices within a very large verticalized company or industry. On the livestock side of things, we've gotten pulled into there. A lot of that is around water usage. In fact, we just are in the process of, we will have a hard launch. We call it hard launch, so a sales launch, on our first really truly consumer direct product, and it's livestock. It's specific to stock tank management, stock tank monitoring and alerting, for primarily beef and equine producers, but there's other use cases in there as well. We'll be launching that at National Cattlemen's Beef Association convention in February. That came as a result of trying to understand water use, water management, and tie that to herd health, and provide some of these sort of automated offset labor issues, or offsetting labor issues for producers. Because again, it's what can we automate to put more time back in a day for whether it's a producer or someone who's in support of farmers.
Yeah, I think that's good because I mean, my size farm, we can get a lot of stuff done with the labor we have, and having my retired dad living there at the farm, and that's still his hobby, is still helping me farm, and so he's around, and I have one of my sons that's interested in farming. The other three kids, it's hard to get them out to the farm, but um, there's getting to be less and less farms out there. There's going to be less and less farm kids coming out of farms, and there's going to be less of a pre-trained labor force out there too, if you want to call it that. I mean, that's probably every generation has said the same thing. It's just every generation probably gets cut in half or more too. So yeah, automation is going to be a bigger thing, and the more we can do there, and just have more efficiency on the farm, and like you said, with compliance too. We probably have to be joking ourselves if we're thinking there's not more compliance or more hoops we're going to have to jump through, whether it's from the government or other programs to achieve certain dollars or things like that in the future. So that's good.
Yeah, and I think that's we never want to position ag technology, and I say we as in like the industry. We should never want to position you know technology as something that's meeting a governmental demand or a regulatory demand. It can do that, right? And I mean, I sometimes that's the focus of it. But our as we're talking to our producers and folks who are using platforms within our space, or prospective customers, there's really, in order for us to gain adoption and gain trust in the market, we do need to provide solutions that are forward looking, and that meet these sort of minimum requirements of whatever group it is. But they have to have a practical use today as well, right? And so just
Yeah.
because we're gathering information, not a lot of folks are really interested in saying, well, I'm just going to gather a lot of data and see how I can use it in 10 years. That might be interesting for some producers or farmers, we think, but by and large, they're not going to pay a lot of money for that, right? It needs to have a practical application to make their lives easier, or their lives more efficient, or their enterprises more profitable, in the near term. And we're really focused on doing some of that stuff too.
How do you kind of gauge what the market needs or is going to need? That's the biggest thing, is trying to guess that certain product the market's going to need 5-10 years from now that we're not even thinking of, right?
We hope we
um,
don't have to guess too much. That's
Yeah, and what's the old joke when they, developed, or Henry Ford developed the car? He said everybody else was looking at making a faster horse, right? We don't want faster horses. We want something different. We want to adopt something new. But yeah, what's your best way of forecasting that, or just assessing that need out in the market?
Yeah, so we're fortunate. You know, we have a lot of we're a decent sized company. We're a small company where we've got a good number of folks in house here, but we've got a lot of years of experience behind the folks too. So just because we're a relatively young company, being 7 or 8 years old, we have many times that experience in house. And so I'm one of the younger individuals here probably, right? And so we've got a lot of folks who have been around. They understand the history of sort of the evolution of the IoT space in agriculture and the automation space in agriculture. they kind of got their thumb on where things are going. So that's the first part of it, is sort of an institutional knowledge transfer internally for us. Secondly, we stay very, very close to the market as much as we can. We're all, those of us who are in, I would say visible or sort of decision making sort of in house here. We're in touch with the customers from the C-suite down. We we're production ag folks from the beginning, right? So kind of everyone who's on the sales and the business development side, many of our engineers, we were born into production agriculture. Some of us still maintain connections and ties there, and so those casual conversations go a long way. Like when I'm talking to personal friends and folks that I know who are heavily invested in the ag space from a production end of things, they're giving me some really good insight as far as like what do they want to see in the industry and where do they want to go on the business side as well. And then the third thing that we do is when we do want to bring something forward, if we have a solution, if we have a new feature set or something like that within our platform, we do a lot of due diligence on the product management side. I don't work on the product management side personally. I'm on the business development side of things. But our product management team does a great job of, whether it's customer interviews, understanding, what is available in the market currently and how is it working, where are the gaps in the industry, collecting data and information on, just from various resources we have around the industry to say, hey, what are folks asking for and what do they not know to ask for? And I think, for me, that's been the most interesting piece of bringing new technology forward is, just like the Henry Ford comment is I think pertinent here, right? It's, ask people what they want, they would have said a faster horse. Yeah. That's valid. Folks only kind of know to ask for what they know to ask for. And if, not everybody has time to sit back and sort of imagine where are we going to be, that's kind of our job to help paint that vision and ask the right questions to lead them into a value-based conversation around technology. Because the worst thing we can do is, for us personally, for us as a company, the worst thing we can do is bring something to market that nobody wants. The worst thing we can do for our customers is also bring something to market that nobody wants, because it's not providing value to them in any way, shape, or form. So we do a pretty good job of that. Like we generally do a fair bit of due diligence internally first, and then slowly take that forward to say, okay, not only what do you want, but how do you want this to handle? Because I know, you've been around about as long as me, right? In the industry, probably actually longer, it sounds like. We saw maybe some, without giving any specific examples, maybe some clumsy entrance to the market by folks early on. And they had a great idea and they didn't necessarily know how to implement it or how to sanction adoption among, a target customer base, or maybe even what a target customer group was going to be. They just kind of knew they had a good idea that should enter. I'm curious, you as a farmer and you as a service and a products provider to farmers, what's your opinion of technology adoption and how we can say enhance and increase adoption rates of new technologies across the space?
Yeah, and that's always a hard one. I think, it always goes back to that classification of farmers, the early adopters, the guys that will definitely just try stuff and work with it. And then there's kind of, I don't want to call them the old guard, but that just the standoffish types, the prove it to me types that, want to see something in the market for 5 to 10 years. And you still see that too. I know the average age of the farmer is growing, but I'd say the average age of the decision makers in a lot of these farms is still in their 20s and 30s. There's a lot of the guys maybe own the farms, but their sons are doing a lot, or they've got a crop consultant that's younger doing a lot of the decision making on some of that stuff. So it's not an old guys club anymore or something. It seems like. It seems like a lot of the clients I was working with when I was doing more direct with farmers, there was a fair amount of guys in their 20s and 30s that are pretty open, I would say, to technology, but it seems like the over promising, under delivering model has been out there a lot in ag tech, so that scares people away a little bit. So it makes people a little shyer to play with some of this stuff. And some of it, it's not cheap either. So, one mistake here or there is can be costly, or, just maybe it's a waste of money, type thing. So, I think it's hard for farmers to get a good test on will something work, how it's going to work. Definitely have to take a bit of trust and put it out there and trial some things. But
It's you make a good point that, it's just an observation that, it's a thing that I've noticed over the last probably 10 or 12 years. But as I look at the industry and I look at my little corner of the space that I live in, both geographically and professionally, but then you're looking at it across North America in particular, this has to be the most educated group of farmers that like the world has ever seen, right? From a formal education perspective. And if you'd have told me back in the 90s when I was in high school, if you'd have said, "Hey, you're going to know a bunch of farmers who are their primary living is going to be made on the farm, and they're going to have PhDs," that would have been a crazy statement to make. And I know several of them today, both farmers and ranchers. And looking at that and the amount of, a degree does not make you intelligent, but the journey to get to a degree certainly can, right? And we
right,
have a
yeah,
lot of folks who are very not only educated, but they're well versed in critical thinking and applying creativity to business. I think that's an interesting. Do you see that come into play in your part of the world where folks are maybe they're not taking more risks, but they're becoming more creative in how they're attacking the business?
yeah, I think so too. And that's a good point you made. There's a lot of, like, my dad's generation, there wasn't as many with college degrees. Maybe it was a 2-year course or a short course or a type degree, or no degree. Maybe they worked a little bit elsewhere off the farm and started taking over the farm. But I would say my generation that graduated high school in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a fair amount of those going to school. Or maybe it's just a 2-year tech school or a 4-year school. And um, so yeah, I definitely agree that the level of education, and not saying anything against guys that just start farming too, because some of the best farmers I know are guys my age that just started farming right away. But I think they have, over the years, have taken training classes. They've taken things. They've done ways to improve their education. Maybe it wasn't formal schooling, but classwork or just other trainings. Um, and that's part of, I've been a CCA, certified crop advisor for since, I don't know, about 20 years now. And there's those yearly things you have to do to keep sharp and keep up on it. And I think some of them see it as just a check the box. I got to get my credits to apply for this thing. And I try to actually learn new things, or try to seek out those credits by improving my knowledge, because hopefully that helps me in my role, and hopefully it helps me on the farm. um, but
That
yeah,
is
I think,
always
yeah, it's hard to dial in on it. And just kind of to that point too, the other day I saw a friend of mine that farms. He kind of had a poll out there on Twitter, kind of asking farmers, if knowing what you know now, what would you have done maybe in college? Would you have gone, what degree or what focus maybe would you have gone for more? And it was pretty interesting. A lot more, finance and business versus maybe agronomy, that kind of thing, or diesel tech, or some of those things that I think a lot more guys wish they would have looked
I
at
always think that too,
at
Adam.
that
But
business side.
I always think that too. But if I went back in time and tried to tell my 18 or 19-year-old self to take something like more finance, I would have just laughed at me.
Yeah, I hear you. And I was pretty similar track. I mean, I was ag econ, so it's more ag business, and then I was maybe 400 level class away from animal science minor. So it's kind of the same thing. Or marketing, just marketing classes, grain marketing, all that. I mean, I wish I would have taken more there. I mean, I feel I can do a pretty good job on the agronomics, and a lot of that I've learned in my job career. But the marketing side of it is, and I see that with a lot of farmers I've worked with. Really good producers can raise a heck of a crop, and then it comes to marketing, and that's where a lot of the struggles are.
Well, it's no one's ever accused me of being an academic in any regard, so I don't really have to worry about that. Probably the smartest thing I ever did. My wife has a PhD in animal science, and so that's as smart as I get from an academic perspective.
Yeah,
But I think this is it's a good thing when I think about people who, whether they've gone to a 4-year institution, a 2-year college, no college whatsoever, but they've been involved in their trade organizations or commodity boards and different, even working with their land grant extension groups.
yeah,
it's about the experience, and it's about gaining experience through institutional transfer of knowledge. And so it's networking, right? It's developing a group of folks who we can pull some information from. I think it's one of the things, and a plug for Grand Farm, I suppose, but I mean, I think that's one of the things that is so wonderful about Grand Farm, is it's operating on multiple levels of that networking. That's why we like it. That's why we're big supporters of it. There are other groups, I'm sure, around the country who do similar things. I know we work with some here in Nebraska, on a technology and innovation side of things, that they're kind of working to the same end. But whether you're, straight out of high school and went back home to farm, if you went and got a PhD from a land grant university, or something similar, or anything in between, having a network of folks where you can kind of lean on, ask their opinion, gain some industry influence, or gain some industry perspective outside of the box that you exist in. I think that's a really important piece of moving technology forward in the ag space.
No, I agree, and that's my sister's on the Grand Farm board, and I've been involved with Emerging Prairie and Greg there, and his dad was a customer of mine that when he was farming, and he was kind of similar situation. He worked in egg lending and egg that side and farmed, um, and being involved with those guys, and over the years I kept telling my sister, and I tell Greg, you need more farmers involved on this. I mean, you guys are coming up with a lot of great ideas, a lot of great things, but I would hate to get to the point, and you kind of mentioned earlier, where you come forward with a product or a solution or offering, and you bring it out to the farmer, and he's going to be really blunt, and he's going to let you know what he thinks about that, and it might just be, well, no, we don't want that. But 3 years ago in the development of this product, you would talk to 5 farmers, got some good feedback, get some good input, let them break it, let them test it, let them try it out. He'd be way ahead on that kind of thing. So
That's exactly, working in not an engineer myself, but working in a building full of engineers, and from various disciplines. I will say that I still believe that the best engineer out there, the best test engineer out there, is a farmer. And maybe second to a farmer is a rancher, only because they're limited in the number of implements that a rancher can break versus a farmer. But man, if you have something that you want an opinion on, take it to a farmer, let them pick it apart, let them curse at it a little bit or whatever they do, and then let them bring back suggestions on how to improve it. I guarantee it's going to make it a better product, whether it's a physical piece of steel, or a cloud-based application.
right. How do you guys do your proof of concept network? When you're getting close to a launch of some new product, is that
That's
kind of an
basically
avenue
how
you do, or work
That's
with
basically
guys?
how we do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mentioned before, many of our engineers and our managers here they're production ag based. They either were born into it, or they grew up in it, or they still work in that space somewhere. There's a lot of farmer engineering that goes on behind the scenes at a company like ours, because we are a hardware enabled solution. So we have hardware that's pulling sensor information out of a field or a barn or a space. And then we bring it into a cloud-based platform, and then that's kind of where we can do the data management and things. So, there's all kinds of variables that go into that from an environmental perspective, and especially when you bring livestock into the mix. Now you're talking about a whole different complicating set of factors. We try to plan for as many of those as we can. We like to break a lot of things that are physical, and then we like to break a lot of things that are not physical, that are cloud based, before we go to market with it, before a customer sees it. And so that way, when we do go to a pilot program with customers, they generally are having a good experience from the get go, but maybe there's some refinement that needs to occur. And so we'll take assessment from them and suggestions back, if we need to refine processes, or refine the way that something is visualized, or the interaction with the platform itself. We can make those adjustments, but the bulk of it's done before we get to that point.
So how do on maybe just give an example on a farmer using your technology? How is what they're gaining mostly is efficiencies, or they're being more smart with their management, or especially like you said, treating manure as a commodity now. I think manure just used to be kind of maybe treated as more as a byproduct, something you had to do. But I wish there was more livestock around me to utilize some manure, and get some of that in. North Dakota is probably one thing it lacks on is livestock. markets like that, as I see in other states and other farmers being able to benefit from usage of manure. So how does that, I don't know, maybe just step me through a quick example of some of your key products and how farmers benefit from them.
Yeah, the manure one's a great example, I think, of finding some efficiencies and maybe changing a perspective on a particular commodity or a particular product. Um, Manure is, and that's a line that I use a lot. I want to move manure from a liability column to an asset column whenever possible.
Yeah.
In order to do that, we need to have a volume of it, right? If you can't measure something, if you don't know how much you have, then the value of it is not quite there. You don't understand what the full value of it is, and then you have to make sure that you're able um, to utilize it in an efficient manner, whether that's selling it out the door, if it's applying it somewhere on your own acres, or if it's just handling it. It needs to be done safely. And so, yeah, we have some manure specific ones. So we have a complicated system here in the Midwest with a swine producer that um, several hundred thousand head of animals over several locations and sites, deep pits and lagoon storage, kind of pumps everything via subterranean piping system to a centralized satellite lagoon, several million gallon lagoon.
Mm.
They fill that up kind of throughout the off season. During cropping season, they move that out. They pump it into, through another series of underground pipes to, I think, 15 or 16 center pivots. And then they distribute that over crop ground. Previously, that had all kind of been done by sight and touch, right? So they've got a crew of employees who they've got to understand which pipes are pressurized when. They need to understand, when they kind of keep track of it on paper and via text message, who's doing what, where. It's this kind of coordinated event. Sometimes accidents can happen. Sometimes you don't intend for something to go on a field that it does. It just becomes an inefficient labor suck of a process. What we were able to do for them is, one, we're able to visualize the volume of manure in their deep pits and their elevated structures. We're able to visualize and measure the amount of product that they have, or effluent that they have in their satellite lagoon. And then we're also able to bring into the cloud space the pressurized segments of that pipeline. What's pressurized, what's not, what's the PSI at that level, and who needs to turn what on and where. And then the last element was, we're able to, let some legacy center pivot systems that don't have full controls on them. We have some technology in house where we're able to sort of manage that. So they know which pivots are running, which pipes are feeding that, where it's coming from, and what the volume is that's being fed into it. At the end of all of that, they're saving labor, a significant amount of labor annually. They're doing it in a safe. They're moving this manure in a safer way, environmentally safer way. They're at a much reduced risk of pipe breakage or just accidental discharge, things like that. And really, what they're able to accomplish is a more efficient system end to end, and knowing what's moving from where to where. And when it comes time for that compliance reporting, it's all in a digital file, right? And so you can export that information into a CSV based file that can be applied as needed into a reporting context. So really, it checks a lot of boxes. That particular scenario checks a lot of boxes for automation to save labor and gain efficiency in a system, while also providing some residual benefits down the line.
Oh, I'm sure just having the ease of that information, the access to easy information is a big benefit. It's maybe not a cost savings, it's one of those savings, those kind of that mental income. I remember one of my econ professors, there's different kind of income, and one was mental income, and it's just feeling better about your decision. You're more confident in it. You gain some income that way, just personally, by having that. So I'm sure there's a lot of that, just makes it easier.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned our stock tank monitoring solution. It's that's one where that it's focused very, very keenly on that sort of mental income. Now, there's, especially in a drought year, you have livestock. You understand. I mean, water is a precious commodity and resource for livestock producers, and you can't always be there with them all summer long when they're out on grass, and you can't always be there when they're out on stalks in the wintertime or wherever they happen to be. And those who depend on wells, whether they're windmill or solar or something else, um, you know, missing a stock check, um, one time can be incredibly costly. And so you end up spending a lot of time, a lot of fuel, a lot of energy, but then a lot of worry when you're away, because where cows are, people generally aren't for
Yep.
at least part of the year.
True.
And so, can we provide some longer term, savings and return on investment, but also some short term practicality. And there's very large ranchers who we're talking to who they want this product as soon as it comes on board, right? They want dozens of them. Absolutely, you've got 30 windmills, get these out there. I think that's great. That's not to discount the folks who have a single water tank, right? And maybe they look a little bit more like me. Maybe they're suburban and they've got some cows out in the country, or some horses. Maybe they want to take their kids to a basketball game, and they don't want to have to worry about a basketball or baseball tournament somewhere down the road. They don't want to have to worry about trying to find qualified labor that they can trust, to help manage these things. They want to keep an eye on it from afar. And if you have to tackle an emergency, you can tackle an emergency. But getting a good night's sleep, understanding that everything is taken care of, that's a big win.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great idea. I mean, I think, and then for how dry we've been the last couple of years out here, I know we had to we actually sold the cows a couple of years ago, but leased that pasture out, some neighbors, and we had to redig out the stock pond just to get that water there. It's a small situation, like you said, it's a single pasture and a single stock pond, but um, when I was going to school at NDSU, I worked for they've got a big ranch that just south of us, and working on 4 or 5 windmills out there, and those stock tanks, and doing rotational grazing and that kind of things. And it's like you said, it's remote. It's that tank's out in the middle of the section. So you have to get on a 4-wheeler or anything to even access it, easily enough. Where yeah, if I could look at my phone or look on the computer screen and go, yeah, it's 2/3 full, it's pump is running, all that stuff, or that'd be great.
Well, and you mentioned something earlier in our conversation, about just that we're not making more farm kids, and that's very true. I mean, I can speak personally. My dad comes from a family of 8 kids. His cousins come from a family of, like, his aunt and uncle had like 10 or 11, I think.
Yeah.
And that wasn't uncommon. Now most folks have 2 or 4 or 5 kids, and that's kind of where it's at. And they're not spending near as much time in the production space maybe as they used to. Just generally speaking. We're just not making as many farmers as we used to. And we're going to have to do something to help. I think bring some of the, you probably have some inborn intuition. When you step out, maybe you don't have cows today, but if you walked out there, you generally know how to manage cows.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Yep.
probably the same way. Like, if I came across some cows that are out in the greater ditch, I could probably go get them in without much problem.
Right.
I don't know that we're seeing that as a commonality anymore. And so, how do we take that intuition that we've had for generations, and how do we put that into an automated space to make folks' lives a little bit easier? Because we're going to have to create some of that intuition in the next generation or the generations to come. And we're very interested in sort of solving some of those solutions, or those problems as well, and providing solutions to say, hey, not all labor is qualified labor on farm. There's a lot of intuition that goes into it. Can we provide some of that qualification for the folks that are there?
No, that's great. Yeah, I think that's probably that next big niche that needs to be replaced. Like you said, is that just old knowledge that has been passed down, and just those things you've learned. Even my kids now, we actually live in town 5 miles away from the farm. There's a lot of things they're not learning like I did living on the farm, just being immersed into it every day. Try to get them out there when I can, but I know that experience isn't the same as I had. And things are a lot easier today too. I mean, versus look at what my grandpa farmed with versus what my dad did, what I'm at, what my son could be. Those guys that are in their 80s and 90s now, that was hard living. That was hard farming. I'd say now it's maybe more hard financially. There's more that hardness. It's more risk. My same size farm that dad was growing up with, it's 4 times the amount of money we're dealing with today, versus what he was dealing with. So there's a lot more of that kind of stuff starts getting involved. So um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And for us, automation isn't so much about, um, it's not at all about replacing jobs. Not really. It's about filling in for the jobs that are just, they're not there, right? So how do we, how do we utilize automation, whether that's in a data space or in a mechanized space, or combination of the two, because our gap in farm labor right now, whether you're in the retail or processing and distribution side, or if you're even on farm or on ranch, the labor gap is significant across the country, and we're not making more people that can just come in and plug into a situation, and want to do that work. And so, we're working with stakeholders, here, and folks that we, use, as a kind of an advisement group, and they bounce ideas off of us to sort of find some of the solutions there, right? How are what do you need as a farmer? What do you need as a rancher? What are jobs that you need to find automated solutions around?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, and I think companies realize that they don't want to replace the farmer. Some of these automated tractors and some of that thing, I don't think it's trying to replace the farmer, because I mean, there's a lot of farmers, and I do too. I mean, I like driving the tractor. I like planting. I like combining. I don't want that fully automated where I'm not doing that anymore, to a point. There's gonna be efficiencies. Some of this, automated grain carts and some of those kind of things make a lot of sense, because it's just kind of that one additional thing. And I've no friends out in Western North Dakota. It's hard to find people, and they've got large farms. They got one guy, he's turning down land because he can't. He's got a hired man that's in his 70s. His dad's in his late 70s, and he said, after those guys go, I don't know who else I'm going to hire. So do I want to take on more risk if I don't have the labor force? So
That's Adam. It's great. Maybe that's a good point to end on. I have a good friend, a very close friend of mine, who farms a few thousand acres here in Nebraska. And when I kind of stepped into the ag technology space, in the automation space, that was literally what he told me. He said, I love farming. And I was sitting in a combine with him when he said, I love farming. Don't replace me. Just make my job a little bit easier.
Yes, exactly. Yep. I think that is getting around to service providers, technology providers. Because there's a lot of things that I see, that I recognize, I realize when I'm out in that field, that I can do for next year, taking notes on it. And that some of that is getting me more automated notes, or marking points and all that kind of stuff that can help me do a better job. Or just when I'm looking at data, I'm looking at yield maps, I'm looking at fertility maps, looking at a field. I remember when I was driving across there going, okay, yeah, the yield is really low there, but the corn was flattened because my neighbor's cows got out. It wasn't because I had rootworm or IDC or some insect issue or fertility issue. It was some other type of thing. So where I think an automated combine, they would just said it's a low spot, it's a low yielding area, and that's it. So
Right. Well, what you're describing is a bionic farmer. I love the idea of that.
yeah, for sure.
You can be an extension of your machine, right? That's terrific.
Yep.
And vice versa.
No, good. I don't know, Austin, any other, kind of probably getting close to the hour mark here, but any other final thoughts? Or
I'll tell you what, I appreciate your time, Adam, and I appreciate, Emerging Prairie and the Grand Farm and everything that those guys are doing up there. Being able to have conversations like this is why we're excited to work with folks like that, and kind of around the industry, and be able to not just talk about who we are, but learn a little bit about, whether it's a producer or someone else in the ag space, or service providers, learn what folks want, what they need, what they expect of ag technology companies. And I think just continuing to sort of develop engagement around the space, to us, that's very important. And to me personally, I really appreciate your time, and the folks at Grand Farm and Emerging Prairie.
Yeah, no, I think it was good discussion, and that's one of the reasons that I kind of want to get involved with Grand Farm too. Is like you were saying earlier, there's a lot of networking. We've got a board of advisors, but there's going to be so many more companies like yourself that are going to start working with Grand Farm and looking for real case scenarios and want to trial things. And I think Grand Farm makes a good kind of area for those kind of people to get together and offer up their service, offer up their farm, offer up their company to collaborate, work together. We're all trying to do better here, right? So no, it's a good network altogether.
And that will do it for this month's episode of Emerging Grower. We wanted to thank Adam and Austin for being on this month's episode, and we also want to thank Grand Farm for energizing this podcast, along with all of the Grand Farm partners. To learn more about Grand Farm, you can visit the website, which is www.grandfarm.com. You can expect new Emerging Grower episodes to release in the third week of each month on all audio platforms. We hope you all have a great rest of your day.